You solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God.
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Speak directly into the microphone.
Thank you.
May I, Judge?
You may. You can
Would you
inquire.
state-
after.
Would you state your name, spell your last name for the record?
Thank you. Yes. William Forrest Fischer. Fischer is Fischer.
Mr. Fisher, how are you employed?
I am an attorney with Moulton Law Office in Driggs, Idaho.
Okay, and you're licensed to practice law in the state of Idaho?
I am.
Did you have an occasion in December of 2021 in regards to a client by the name of Garth Daybell?
I did.
What was the nature of that representation?
As part of my employment, my office contracts out with Fremont County to do contract public defense work. And so under that contract, I was asked to come down to St. Anthony to the Fremont County Courthouse to represent Mr. Daybell, who at that time was under a grand jury testimony situation.
Was it a grand jury indictment against Mr. Daybell? Or proceeding?
It was a proceeding.
Okay, and the distinction is that a grand jury is summoned and they hear testimony, is that right?
I believe so. This was actually my first encounter with a grand jury.
Oh, okay. Lucky you.
Yes.
And at that point, were you aware of what charges were being attempted to be brought against Mr. Daybell?
I was not, nor that I can't really recall it this time.
Okay. But you do recall that it was Mr. Daybell was the focus of the grand jury?
Mr. Garth Daybell, yeah, that is correct. That's
Okay.
correct.
And you don't have any recollection of what the underlying facts were about why he was brought in front of the grand jury?
Not specifically. It was a long time ago. I can't really recall. I do recall at that time he had actually previously testified in front of the grand jury. And when I was brought in, the grand jury had some follow-up questions, and that's what I was called in to assist him with during that time.
So you don't remember if this was a second grand jury that was convened?
I believe it was the second time they called him in. I'm not sure if that was a completely separate grand jury. I believe it was the same grand jury, but I can't really recall.
You're not sure about that?
That's correct.
Okay. Is it possible that it was a second grand jury convening against Mr. Daybell for perjury?
Objection, Your Honor. Asked and answered calls for speculation.
Sustain.
Do you have any recollection of the advice that you gave Mr. Daybell at that point?
Some. At that time, I had come in and Mr. Garth Daybell had some questions. He was concerned, given the fact that they had asked him some questions and he had previously testified. And so I consulted him as a defense attorney to answer only the question that was being asked, and that if he wasn't quite sure, that he could take the time to confer with me. I was not in the grand jury. I wasn't observing it. I was sitting outside of the courtroom. And I told him that if he ever needed to take a break, he could come talk to me. We could talk about the situation and go from there. Beyond that, I told him not to talk to the press anymore.
Okay. And at this point, you don't have any distinct recollection as to why you were there or what you were doing, is that right?
I was there to advise him on giving testimony in his follow-up grand jury questioning. And my role as a defense attorney, and I believe in talking to Mr. Daybell at that time, was to ensure that he did not get himself into any trouble by possibly committing perjury or not remembering something quite correctly. I was there to assist him and to ensure that he, if he had questions, that he could come and talk to me and that we could go through it on a step-by-step basis.
Do you recall ever telling Mr. Daybell that this was a trap designed to catch him?
I don't recall ever saying that, though that would possibly be something that I might have said. I don't recall specifically.
Okay.
As a defense attorney, that's always something that we're concerned about, is that if they've previously testified on something, that if they're called to testify on the same thing again, that there is the potential as a defense attorney to potentially cross yourself. And so to watch out for that.
And your understanding is the focus of the grand jury wasn't about Chad Daybell. It was solely about Garth Daybell and his previous testimony. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And at this point, your understanding is that grand jury did not indict Mr. Daybell for any kind of perjury charge. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Judge, I have nothing else.
All right. Any cross?
Just briefly, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Mr. Fisher, it was your understanding then that it was the same grand jury with some additional questions?
I don't really, I presume, but I didn't know for sure.
And at the end of the day, you provided legal advice to your client, correct?
That is correct.
And he testified in that second proceeding,
That is correct.
and there was no indictment.
That is correct.
I have no further questions.
All right, thank
No
you.
follow-up, Judge.
Very well, that'll conclude the testimony. Mr. Fisher, thank you for appearing.
Thank
See
you, Your
back
Honor.
in Driggs someday.
Thank you.
I have cases out there as well.